there's football and Ravens and Steelers and all that good stuff during a holiday week, I'm going to bring in an old friend, a guy I don't see as often as I'd like to, but he is on my television, often on ESPN and ESPNGO.com and everywhere baseball is served. He is Jason Stark. You can follow his journey at JasonST, and hundreds of thousands do with the bat and the glove and the ball and the books and the Hall of Fame votes. And, hey, man, plenty of meat on the bone here if you're an Orioles fan this offseason, right? It's never a dull moment, even when it's kind of dull, right, Jason Stark?
Of course, Nestor. It's December. This isn't Dan Duquette's time to get moving. He likes to wait till January or February or whenever the bargains appear in the bin, would you say?
Look, man, I could start here with the press pass, and we got a president that's now going to take away media credentials in sort of bewildering ways, but it's been 25 years. What's the Angelos legacy in all of this? And, I mean, I think 15 years ago we said, well, if he doesn't sign Messina, I'm done. And then it's if he doesn't sign Chris Davis, which he did, I'm done. And now it's Machado, right? And now it's Boris, and we're going to hear this. The drum beat's going to go on for 2 years or until such time where they sign him or deal him. I think there's zero chance of signing him. But, you know, this continues on when you don't win and you own a team for a quarter of a century, right?
Well, they've got 2 years to win while he's still there. So
fair enough.
I mean, we may have to reassess this by the time Manny walks out the door, assuming he does walk out the door. But this is going to be a challenge, Nestor. There's just no doubt about it. Manny Machado is going to hit free agency after his age 25 season. And that just doesn't happen much. His agent is Dan Lozano. And if you're looking for a model for how is this going to work, Dan Lozano was Joey Votto's agent. He signed Joey Votto to a 10-year extension with 2 years to go on his deal. So it became basically 12 years and $255.5 million. And Joey Votto, at the time, had just finished his age 27 season. So that was 2 years older than Manny. So how many years and how many dollars is he going to ask for? And could you see the Orioles being comfortable giving this guy 10, 12, 14, 15 years, whatever it is? I'm not sure that he won't get that from somebody, but I have a hard time believing it'll be in Baltimore.
Well, and then you wonder if you want these generational players, right? You want your Brooks Robinsons and your Jim Palmers. And look, no better example of when it goes wrong. You live in Philadelphia famously. You've lived there and covered the Phillies in baseball famously. Boy, the Phillies have got hard times because they wanted to build statues of all those cats around there, and they wanted to sprinkle money around and say thank you for all of the deeds and the parade and all of that. And that hasn't worked out as a great recipe either in Philadelphia, right? Where they have more money, right?
Right. Well, I mean, if you sign everybody for big bucks, it means you have no maneuverability if something doesn't work out, if somebody gets hurt, if somebody gets old. And it happened to all of them. And so, they went through 5 incredible years where they won every year, and they won more games each year than they won the year before, and it only turned into one parade. And then they've gone through 5 really difficult years. And you looked around last year, and there was almost nobody in the park. I mean, they're building back towards something. It's a long process. They're probably at least 3 more years away from being back to getting ready to contend. And that's what happens if you spend the money at the wrong time on the wrong people, and you do it just to keep the band together. You've got to have really good business and baseball reasons to do this. And if you're going to give Manny Machado $30 million a year for 12, 13, 14 years, and you play in Baltimore, can you do anything else? That's really the question they'll have to face.
Well, the question was, why do Davis after not doing Cruz and now probably not doing Trumbo and certainly not doing Wieters? The Chris Davis thing was, Jason, I mean, look, I've chased this crazy old man here for 23 years, right? I mean, it's been my life story. The day he goes, everyone will call me for something nasty to say about him or whatever. But it's just, it's bizarre, right? I mean, the things that they've done at every turn have been bizarre. And one of the more bizarre bizarre things was that Buck Showalter ever wanted this gig, that it's actually turned out pretty well, and they've made the playoffs 3 of the last 5 years, so they can say, well, we've won for a period of time. But the decisions to give the guy who wasn't there on a drug suspension when you needed him in the ALCS 12 months later all of the money and then turn your back on Machado. Of all the guys you would want, Machado would have been the guy you absolutely had to start by giving $150, $200 million to. They didn't do that, and now we're a year out on the Davis contract. The clock is ticking a little bit more. The stadium, as you've pointed out in Philadelphia, empty there. Hey, down here, people aren't even going to Ravens games down here, Jason. It's the weirdest. It's been a very, very weird dynamic having witnessed this for 25 years. But baseball has problems with that right now. But the fallback is, well, they're not selling tickets. I've had 3 people now say to me, well, maybe if they sold more tickets, they could afford Manny Machado. Boy, that's when I go off the deep edge after the guy's pocketed $1 billion, because if it's about what they can afford or what he's already made, they can afford Machado. They're just choosing not to, and I think it really opens the door for him to not want to do business with them and to see what's on the other side of the curtain, especially when the Yankees and the Dodgers, the Cubs, all these teams are going to have a ton of money 2 years from now. That much is obvious, and it feels like this has been a really kind of quiet offseason because people are waiting on him and Harper and Trout and some of these other stars, right?
Well, it's been a weird free agent class, for one thing. It's just overloaded with people who do what like Mark Trumbo does, right? All the
right.
First baseman, DH, corner outfield types. They're all sitting around waiting for somebody to sign, and it ain't happening. And basically, just the closers have signed, and there's been other than that, it's clear that a lot of teams are doing what Dan Duquette loves to do, which is just wait out the pack. And you get past Christmas, you get past New Year's, you get into January, and players get nervous, and the price starts coming down, and that's going to happen now with a lot of these players, a lot. And that's why this offseason's been so slow. The Harper, Machado, Donaldson, Kershaw, David Price class, if they're all in it, it's 2 years away. It's not this winter. It's not next winter. It's the winter after. Adam Jones will be in that class too, by the way. And you can't wait around for 2 years because you got to charge admission in between. But there's no doubt that some of the big clubs are trying to position themselves now to have the money to go after those players then. I think that's your point. And that is exactly correct.
The great Jason Stark joins us here from ESPN. He is a senior writer there. He's covered. How many years have you covered baseball now? I want to put it. I know you don't brag about it on Twitter, but is it 30? How many has it been?
30-something. I have to do the math. But I've been at ESPN now since 2000, so 16 years just at ESPN.
That's a whole century so far, right? Every one of them, man.
Well, yeah, the metric system.
You mentioned the Phillies and how much money they wasted. Certainly, I think the Orioles have been incredible benefactors, as have the Blue Jays, and the Rays have sort of missed out on this little version of the Yankees and the Red Sox being vulnerable while being buried under Teixeira, Sabathia, kind of, Sandoval, Ramirez, whatever the money was, Carl Crawford, the wasted money that was spent in those organizations, and maybe the lack of the next big thing. Now, the Red Sox are on the edge of that with Bogarts and Betts, and they're losing Ortiz amongst others, but they loaded up, and that's bad news for the Orioles and the Blue Jays here, that the Yankees got a dozen prospects on August 1st, right? And that they're retooling and reloading and reshaping, because the one thing we know coming out of the wash, they're always going to have more money. That's true, right?
Yeah, look, the division is a monster. It's always going to be a monster. The Red Sox and Yankees are going to have as much money as they want to spend or need to spend forever. And, I think that the labor deal has some impact on those two teams, but it's only when you get to $40 million above the luxury tax threshold that you really have to think twice, because you're paying 90% on every dollar after that. So it's not going to have a lot. The Blue Jays have a ton of money. They're being operated differently, than they used to, because Mark Shapiro came from Cleveland and Ross Atkins came from Cleveland, and they got a little different mentality about how to build a team and sustain a team.
Well, they were
But
also they also had their
more money than the Orioles if they choose to spend it as well.
Well, they had their cupboard, born bare by the previous administration too. I mean, they had nothing left after.
Man.
Yeah,
That's not what you want your team to do. They went for it.
Oh, there's no doubt about that, and they inspired the whole country, including Geddy Lee, behind home plate. Yeah, but then I thought, like, last offseason, they got a little sleepier. I mean, I remember the days back in the 90s in our glory era, Jay, where, you're covering the Phillies and the Blue Jays in the World Series, and they're just reloading with every Winfield and Molitor and Henderson and whoever they could grab. Joe Carter was one of those rentals, even though he's famous as a Blue Jay at this point. But they didn't do that last year. I was a little shocked because I saw them as sort of being able to become the Yankees of the North based on the gigantic footprint of having a brand that's a whole nation,
Well, it is incredible how many people watch their games. I mean, they sell out almost every game. They have now for a year and a half. And somebody in the commissioner's office told me that more people in Canada watch their postseason games than watch them in the United States. I mean, that's how huge they are in Canada. And Rogers is, I wouldn't say they have unlimited funds, but they're a money-making machine. It's just a matter of how much money they want to allocate to the Blue Jays. I don't think this is about money. I just think this is about Mark Shapiro coming from Cleveland after all those years, bringing Ross Atkins with him, and approaching team building in a different way, trying to bring that small market mentality to a team with a lot more money to sustain success. And I mean, that's going to be done differently than the way it's been done in the recent past. But I still think that's going to be a really formidable operation because they've got brains and they've got money. That's what it's all about.
He is Jason Stark from ESPN, senior writer for all things baseball. We love having him on the program. I follow your journey out on the web, Jay, as always, and I thought this week you had a wonderful piece on the cellar dwellers and what the CBA means for them. I did 30 ballparks in 30 days last summer, sort of famously, went to all the ballparks. We swabbed for the bone marrow registry, and you walk into Oakland Stadium after, when you're in a different ballpark, a big league ballpark every night, and then you walk into Oakland. Dude, I love that dump, right? And I know there's probably some part of you that loves it too because it does harken back to the old days at the Vet and Memorial Stadium and County Stadium and sort of old school baseball. But it's gone, it's antiquated, and the football team hangs out there, the baseball team hangs out there, and we're all wondering at what point, how much longer can that go on? And meanwhile, teams like the Padres and the Rays and the Reds, and I talk about Angelo's crying poor and having his media minions say they're not a big market team when they've taken all the money out of two markets, sucked it dry out of Washington as well. But then you cry poor, but then you go out on the field and act poor. And certainly for the Padres, who I'm also a little bit of a closet fan, it is disappointing. And I know that you use the word tank, or that's the industry word for tanking. But then, what is the upshot of saying we're not going to compete, we're not going to spend money now? It's certainly not, we're going to get in the Machado sweepstakes 2 years from now, right?
I don't think you'll see the San Diego Padres be in the Machado sweepstakes.
Then what are they going to spend money on? Or is it...
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason that people look at them and say they're tanking is right now they're spending more money on players who no longer play for their team than they are on players who do play for their team. They've got somewhere in the neighborhood of a $26 to $27 million payroll for their entire big league roster. They've got 6 guys on their team who make more than $1 million. 6. I gave their general manager AJ Preller a chance to explain what they're doing, and I think you can make a case in 3 or 4 years they'll be good. But in the meantime, they're not trying to compete. They're trying to get the number 1 pick, and people are upset about it, and the labor deal doesn't really deal with it. You mentioned Oakland. You mentioned Tampa Bay. They're the 2 worst ballparks in baseball. And the thing that was really interesting about the labor deal is it took dead aim on Oakland. That's a team that plays in the sixth largest media market in America and has been collecting huge revenue-sharing checks, and all of a sudden they're going away because the labor deal says we're going to take away 25% of that next year and 50% the next year and 75% the next year, and then it's done. And that's sending a message, and the message is you better build a ballpark or you're really going to be in trouble. So those, to me, are the two most interesting teams in that piece because they're both on the edge of really unusual situations. And in one case, the labor deal took dead aim at them, and in the other case, the labor deal said, whatever.
Jason Stark joining us here from ESPN, covering all things baseball. Of course, what did you make of the empty stadium here in Baltimore in September? I know, you're a bleeding heart baseball guy. You love baseball. You love Baltimore as a baseball town. We all do. I've spent my whole life here. I remember when it used to be good and fun and open and family-free, all of that stuff. I sit here on the radio, and sometimes we talk about the Orioles and wonder who's listening or who cares, and the same could be said on the online. They have not cultivated new fans here, despite winning the last 5 years. It hasn't been cool. It hasn't caught on. There was a Chris Davis tax last year. The old man sent the season ticket renewals out on Valentine's Day. Unprecedented in the history of modern sport that season ticket holders could not send their money in until 6 weeks before opening day. It's weird. It's always been weird since this guy's owned it, but I think the fact that people aren't going when they're winning, they were playing some really relevant baseball here in September. It's disconcerting to me. Does anybody at the league office or outside of Baltimore really care about it?
Nestor, I've never felt like it's my job to tell fans what they should or shouldn't do, when they should or shouldn't go, whether they should or shouldn't spend their money. September attendance is very often a product of season ticket base more than interest. I think there was interest in their team. I actually kind of disagree with you. I think they have cultivated some new fans, or at least they've got new fans. How much of that is a result of quote-unquote cultivation is a matter of opinion, I guess.
Fair enough. There's a lot of minor league baseball played around here, too.
Attendance in September means all kinds of things, but I don't think it necessarily means a team has got no fans. If that's the conclusion you're drawing, I disagree with it.
I don't think no fans. I just think it's seeing what Chicago, seeing what Kansas City, seeing Toronto, seeing other teams. And Toronto didn't win anything. I mean, Kansas City took them the second year to win. But the wave of support that came after their initial success, even Pittsburgh, that thing that happens when you win a little bit. And, hey, they've won. I will tip 3 caps to Buck Showalter because I didn't think it was possible for something so dysfunctional for so long and Confederate money, especially fighting with the Red Sox and the Yankees, who really are the big boys, that they could win a division and run away with it, that they could be playing in ALCS games. I mean, that was a pipe dream when Buck Showalter took over. Now it's a reality. Now you say, okay, they've won 3 out of the last 5 years. The rumor now is they're going to lose their guy in Machado, that there's not even negotiation going on. That's disheartening, I think. I just think it is, and I don't expect any huge wave of enthusiasm next year, and that worries me. It worries me for the football team, too. So it's not just baseball related, but seeing Camden Yards empty when the team's really good and has been really good and put forth that kind of effort, it's disconcerting. That's all I'm going to say as a local sports fan and a guy that's a Baltimore guy,
Yeah, look, I understand what you're saying. You'd love for your city to be like Chicago is when the Cubs win, right? You'd love for your city to be like Kansas City was when the Royals finally won. But every situation's different, and this is hard for me to say because I love baseball. How many cities in America these days are quote unquote baseball cities? Baseball towns, right? Where baseball is number one. It's the number one love affair, and the team is the number one team. There's just not enough of them. Baseball makes plenty of money, and it puts plenty of fans in the seats, but it runs second to football. And Baltimore is one of those places where the football team rules, right? The baseball team doesn't rule the way it once did. And what turns a town into a baseball town? It's a combination of circumstances. I mean, the baseball team has got to win. It's got to get to the World Series, and it's got to change lives. And it may, in this case, take the football team being not just down, but really down. I don't know that that's going to happen in the next 2 years. But as long as Manny Machado plays baseball there, and as long as Dan Duquette and Buck Showalter are putting the team together, I don't think you should rule out the possibility that they're going to stop finding ways to win. I don't know.
So far, so
you
good.
have a much bleaker view of the future, or at least the near-term future, than I do.
Well, fair enough. I mean, they've been good. I'm worried about the pitching. We're worried about Bundy and Gosman and these guys that have to make it because there is no second line here. There's no sort of plan B, right, when things aren't going well for them. And that concerns me. Last thing for you, Jason, because I know you're in the Hall of Fame thing, and I know you talked to Bud Selig, and you've had to, more than anyone, adjudicate these last 20 years where you and I used to stand in these locker rooms and see these GNC tubs of stuff in lockers and wondering what it all is, then how to judge it 2 decades later. I don't think Bud Selig has a handle on it. I don't know if Manfred does. Certainly, I think Cooperstown doesn't, and the voters don't. Which way is the wind blowing on that, where you go to Cooperstown, and I did last year, there's no Pete Rose, there's no A-Rod, there's no Barry Bonds. The best players of this generation, Clemens, those guys, McGuire, they won't be a part of this, at least as long as that scarlet letter's there. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but I'm saying it's not doing the game or the Hall of Fame any good, right?
Well, I mean, if you went to the Hall of Fame last year, many people showed up, and they've been showing up. Business is fine at the Hall of Fame. But, your point is one that I've been writing and talking about for a long time. It's funny, Nestor, how it took Bud Selig getting elected to the Hall of Fame to make a lot of people decide, whoa, the slope is pretty slippery here. If Bud Selig's in the Hall of Fame, and he was the commissioner during that era, then maybe we need to allow the best players from that era in the Hall of Fame. But I think there are some of us out there who have been writing and talking about this for 8, 9, 10 years. The slope didn't just start getting slippery last week. It's been slippery. And I understand why people would want us as voters to keep all the quote-unquote cheaters out of the Hall of Fame. It's a beautiful thing to say that. When people tell me that, you know what I always ask them? How? How are we supposed to do that? I look at the ballot every year, and unless it's a guy like Manny Ramirez who got suspended twice, I have no idea who did what. I have no doubt that we've already elected 3, 4, 5 players who did something, who took something. And so what I think it's time to do is let's put the best players of all time in the Hall of Fame and let the Hall of Fame explain it. The Hall of Fame has been very comfortable dumping this whole mess into our laps, the writers, the voters. I would like to dump it back in their laps. And let's have the all-time home run champ in the Hall of Fame. And let's put a plaque on the wall that says Barry Bonds hit more home runs than anyone who ever lived, but. Let's put Roger Clemens in the Hall of Fame and put a plaque on the wall that says Roger Clemens won more Cy Youngs than any pitcher in history, but. And let them figure out how they want to explain the but. Because to try to do it this way, it ain't working, man. Let's just realize that the Hall of Fame is a history museum and leave it at that.
And it's not a popularity contest. And Kurt Schilling, who I know is a friend of yours and a friend of mine, who is, bat-S crazy from my stance. I mean, I've unfollowed him on Facebook because I can't take any more of it either. But that shouldn't be held against his pitching prowess, although it will be at this point. I mean, his mouth is too big to be popular on every side of the Hall of Fame committee, right? I mean, he's done himself damage after pitching with words, which is unto itself kind of crazy when you think about it. Now we're going to judge ideology, which I don't agree with, by the way, but I think Curt Schilling's a Hall of Fame pitcher. By the way, I think Mike Mussina's a Hall of Fame pitcher too. But I watch Roger Clemens and all these great players play. It is weird that you go to Cooperstown that they're not there, but there's the little boy fan of me that says, how do you honor cheaters? I mean, it is an honor to be in the Hall. They are cheaters.
Explain it. Put it in context. That's what you ought to do. It's just weird to me they were going to have a Hall of Fame without the guy who hit more home runs than anybody in history, without the guy who got more hits than anybody in history, without the guy who broke Roger Maris's record, without the guy who won the most Cy Youngs ever. I could go on and on here. What kind of Hall of Fame is that? All that stuff happened. Nothing has ever been done by Major League Baseball to attach asterisks, take any of it out of the record books, void wins, void championships. It all happened. And if it all happened, how can you make it unhappen? I don't know the way to do that and get it all right. It can't be done, Nestor. So let's just have a Hall of Fame that says this happened, these guys did what they did, and let the Hall of Fame explain it. Put a plaque before every era that says, here's what happened in this era. Hundreds of players took whatever. Okay, do that. Before Jackie Robinson, put a plaque up that says, baseball was played, but no African-American players were allowed to play in the major leagues in this time. Let's explain and put into context every era in history. And that's when you have a Hall of Fame that really reflects the history of the sport. Right now, it's a wink, wink, nod, nod situation that's just odd. It's awkward. And we're looking the other way on some people, but not on others.
Well, at some point,
we're playing a guessing game. It's ridiculous.
At some point, there'll be a real criteria. You hope, right? I mean, that I'm still trying to figure out the criteria for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame too, Jay. So I bring the football writers on, and we're trying to figure out how in the hell is Art Modell not in the Football Hall of Fame? Well, he's not popular. He did things people didn't like, so therefore we don't vote him in. So we got that going on, dude. I love your work. I love following you. I've always loved following you back from the Philadelphia era. I am blessed that you took a little time during a holiday week to argue and debate and lament baseball and politics and sports in my broken town. So we hope to see you soon over at Cheesesteak, and maybe down there in Clearwater. We'll see some spring training this year. I loved having you on, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and your family, Jay.
Nestor, you too, man. Always entertaining.
Always entertained by you, my friend. 3 books out there. Go find him. Jason Stark, one of the best in the business and one of the real good dudes at ESPN.com, as well as at Jason ST. That's Jason with the Y, because he spells it that way. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. We will be joined by Mike Wallace on Tuesday night at Adams Jeep in Aberdeen. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and for the DKMS as well. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.